Hello everyone. We're going to talk about food today. This is a potentially huge topic, so we're going to narrow it down a little bit by focusing on one of the best and very recent books, the book by Priscilla Ferguson, who teaches at Columbia. She teaches sociology there and has spent her life writing about the sociology of food. The book in front of you, Word of Mouth, is her latest on this topic. I'm going to summarize some of the major themes we're going to talk about right now. One of them is the distinction between haute cuisine and haute food that Ferguson makes. Haute cuisine is basically the traditional way of preparing and consuming food as a social relationship. It's a very elaborate system of manners and table manners and chefs and so on and so forth. It's really the traditional way of doing cuisine, and the French were very central to this. Haute food, by the contrast, is a really modern way of looking at food, Ferguson argues. It's really driven by culinary individualism. It focuses on particular dishes. It's very much doing away with tradition. It tries to summarize the modern attitudes towards food, cuisine, and dining. A second point that Ferguson makes is that we're very ambivalent about food. On the one hand, food can be harmful to us, and we're increasingly aware of that, ranging from food poisoning to just basically food that isn't terribly good for us. And on the other hand, food can be terrific and enjoyable, and so we have the concern, the interest in chocolate. Well, you can see here in London there are a number of hotels that are called Hotel Chocolate. A. Milne's character, Winnie the Pooh, was a happy glutton. He woke up in the morning and what did he eat? He ate chocolate. So here, as Ferguson said, is the characteristically modern attitude towards food. On the one hand, we think it can be terrific. On the other hand, we're very cautious about the possible dangers. Another point that Ferguson makes is what she calls culinary nationalism. About 30 years ago, with the advent of fast food, people were predicting the disappearance of nationalist food traits. The prediction was that food would become similar throughout the world. This hasn't really happened, and you've got an increasing not only revival but importance of culinary nationalism, that is, countries with particular ways of cooking and approaching food. And that's just very interesting, despite the fact that globalism and globalization is, of course, a very important phenomenon in the contemporary world. Basically, what Ferguson does in this book is she stresses the fact that food is a social relationship, and it's embedded in social relationships. And she begins her book by summarizing this by pointing to the song 1964 by the New Beats called Bread and Butter. I'm going to play you that song. It's just a minute long, the bit I'm going to play you, but it's basically about a relationship that starts off being very simple. It's not elaborate, and then it turns out that doesn't work.
I feel like bread and butter. I feel like toast and jam. That's why his baby feeds him. I need the loving man.
So let's talk about the traditional way of doing food, what Priscilla Ferguson calls haute cuisine. This was, of course, the elaborate way of doing food with in-house chefs and very elaborate table manners and so on and so forth. France was the center of this system worldwide, but especially in Europe for a long, long time. As everyone knows, the French aristocracy had very elaborate food arrangements. There were in-house chefs, and they were serving, of course, the monarchy. And then after the French Revolution, France still continued to be the center of the food world. One reason, Ferguson argues, is that the French had a number of advantages over, for example, German or English cuisine or Italian cuisine. First of all, the French state was centralized after the French Revolution, whereas European political power was decentralized, and so was Italian, and so was political power in most European countries. So the French central state after the Revolution could promote food as part of French culture, which it did. And second of all, French culture after the Revolution was aggressively non-religious. They rejected religion as part of the French Revolution. And so it didn't seem like it was particular. It seemed like it could be copied worldwide. And so the French were very dominant. Here's an example of a French manual on telling everyone how to do politeness. Again, people had to be taught how to do these things if they weren't part of the aristocracy. So the manual Amphitryon, which is about guests, tells you what you do if you're hosting a dinner party. At some point you call all the guests into the dining room, and then the host is at the head of the table, and it tells you that you open the wine and you invite everyone to begin, and all the elaborate table manners and so on. People had to be taught that, and the French were at the center of that system. Part of what became the modern food system was really the invention of the restaurant. We, of course, take it for granted that restaurants are out there, but they didn't really exist until the beginning of the 19th century. Before then, you had taverns that from time to time sold food or served food as well as drinks, but you didn't have a restaurant where you could go and have a meal served to you. In part, that was because it didn't occur to people that they could trust some anonymous person to cook a meal for them, someone whom they'd never met. They just didn't trust someone to do that without giving them spoiled food or whatever. So, as I said, the birth of the modern restaurant was in Paris in the 18th century. And in the United States, likewise, it wasn't until the late 18th century, early 19th century, that you had establishments that appeared that could be called restaurants, although they weren't really called restaurants at those times. They had regional names, like in New York City they were called eating houses, in Boston they were called restaurators or victualling houses. And they very much grew in popularity, of course. Here's just something on restaurant regulations. Again, we take that for granted, that there are going to be regulations that make sure that restaurants are not going to make us sick. But those all had to be invented. Again, something that had to be invented was guides that enabled people to decide which of these anonymous establishments, restaurants, they could patronage. It was really a very hit and miss operation. You didn't really want to go into some place that you never heard of. Who knows what might happen? And so one of the earliest guides was, of course, the Michelin guide put out by the French tire company. It started around 1900, and you could consult that, and that gave you some assurance about what restaurant you could trust to go into. Of course, these days, we've gone way beyond the Michelin model, which is basically to have experts who would visit restaurants, test them out, and tell the public if they were suitable. Now we've democratized it, so Zagat's was very innovative, and they basically took public reviews. They had reviews from the general public, and now, of course, we've got Yelp and a whole variety of ways of deciding if we want to go into a restaurant and what kind of place it's going to be. We still go into restaurants that we haven't necessarily tested out, but partly that's because we can rest assured that there are quote-unquote food regulations, and that wherever we are, the city, the province, the country, has some kind of system of inspecting these anonymous institutions. What about culinary America? What's the American approach to food? Culinary nationalism still exists. Despite globalization, there's still a view that each nation has what can be called its own cuisine. Ferguson argues that two features characterize the American attitude towards food. And it's not really particular foods. It's not hot dogs, hamburgers. We do tend to associate those with American food. But Ferguson argues that there's two attitudes and styles that really characterize the American attitude to food. One is it's got to be plentiful. In the United States, we like big plates of food, large sizes. Now, again, that may not necessarily be true of New York City, but New York City isn't typical. And secondly, Ferguson argues The American attitude towards food is characterized by the fact that we like it plain. We don't really like elaborate food with fancy foreign sauces. Again, there are going to be exceptions, but I think she's probably right. There is a tendency to see American food as characteristically plain, and that's a virtue. Then, of course, we've added in the United States characteristic competition. And so there's the famous Nathan's hot dog eating contest, which really combines American attitudes to competition with American attitudes to plenty. So the purpose of the competition is, of course, to see how many hot dogs you can eat in 10 minutes. Let's have a look at a video of the 2014 contest. Remember, it's been going since 1916. You can see on the left here are the rules. The contestants are allowed to dip the hot dogs into water. That helps them eat them, but there are strict rules.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, everybody goes to work. We got the count for you. The 10 minutes to the championship, to the mustard belt. And I'm seeing Stoney pull out early.
Stoney thinks this is the year where he'll make his run, Paul.
A quiet guy, quiet during the introductions, seems to do his talking with his eating, if I can go that route. 10. They count it down to the finish now. At the end, Chestnut is able to move ahead. Let's see how it happens here. Just got it.
Going back, again, looking at American food history and talking about the 20th century, how did we get to really valuing food and valuing cooking? Well, in the 20th century, there were certain basically iconic writers, and Ferguson picks out 3, MFK Fisher, Irma Rombauer, and Julia Child. Irma Rombauer wrote The Joy of Cooking, and basically what she did here was to tell American cooks, who were of course basically women, that it didn't have to be drudgery, that you could really just have a delightful experience. She embedded all her recipes in personal anecdotes and stories, and there she was in the during the Prohibition period. Her book came out in 1931. The Prohibition period, she had featured a recipe for cocktails, which was rather daring of her. Julia Child, iconic book, came out in 1961, taught American women how to cook in the French style. And MFK Fisher, as she was called, starting in 1937, wrote books that, again, stressed that cooking wasn't drudgery, or shouldn't be drudgery. It was a pleasure, that food was a pleasure. And so her first book, Serve It Forth, in 1937, is an animated journey through culinary history, starting with the honey-loving Greeks and then going on into the modern period. She wrote a book in 1941 called Consider the Oyster, which was basically about what a wonderful food the oyster is. In 1942, during World War II, during food shortages, she wrote a book called How to Cook a Wolf. The titles were deliberately provocative and interesting. She was a terrific writer. And the point about this was that despite food shortages, you didn't really have to have boring food. I don't think she was really telling people that they should be cooking wolves, but she was telling them how they could balance their diets, stretch diets during a period when it wasn't easy to get all the best kinds of foods.
I didn't decide I wanted to write about food particularly. I never did write about food particularly, but people read about that first, I guess. So I think I'm a food writer, but I'm not.
It was then that I discovered how to eat little dried sections of tangerine. My pleasure in them is subtle and voluptuous and quite inexplicable. I can only write how they are prepared. In the morning, in the soft, sultry chamber, sit in the window peeling tangerines, 3 or 4. Peel them gently. Do not bruise them. as you watch soldiers pour past and past the corner and over the canal towards the washed Rhine. Separate each plump little pregnant crescent. If you find the kiss, the secret section, save it for Al.
Well, no, I don't think I'm a food writer anymore. I'm a love writer or a fish writer or a fowl writer, fowl, F-O-W-L, or I just write about life, I guess, or living or breathing, or I never thought about writing about breathing, but I could.
The sections of tangerine are gone, and I cannot tell you why they are so magical. Perhaps it is that little shell, thin as one layer of enamel on a Chinese bowl, that cracks.
Then there's the whole question of teaching people table manners. Again, people didn't necessarily know how to do table manners. And so famous writers, Emily Post, for example, taught you how to behave during dinner. Here are her top 10 table manners. First of all, chew with your mouth closed. Again, people didn't understand that. Maybe it's correct, maybe it isn't. But anyway, polite society didn't like to see other people's chewed food in their mouths. Don't slurp, don't smack, don't blow your nose at table. Don't use your utensils like a shovel. This is number 3. Number 4, don't pick your teeth at the table. Number 5, remember to use your napkin at all times. Again, these are things that people were taught. We can debate whether they're good or bad, but anyway, people were taught polite behavior, how to eat. Again, this is all part of haute cuisine. Number 8, avoid slouching, and very important, don't place your elbows on the table while eating. I think most of us would still consider it rather rude if someone was having dinner with us and simply placed their elbows on the table while they were eating. But, and again, this is part of etiquette. Number 9, very important, don't reach across the table, just ask someone to pass something if you'd like it. And number 10, always say excuse me whenever you leave the table. Again, we can debate the ins and outs of these, but there's no question that people tended to follow these quote-unquote table manners. You can look at the same for Britain. This is basically contemporary Britain, and there are still organizations out there that feel they need to teach people in Britain, especially with a lot of immigration, what constitutes polite behavior. So basically, we're told, you can see on the screen in front of you, if you're a guest, it's polite to wait until your host starts eating. You shouldn't start eating right away. Always chew and swallow your food in your mouth before taking more. Always say thank you when you're served something. It tells you what food you can eat with your fingers and what you can't. According to this, you can eat chicken and pizza with your fingers, but otherwise you should use a knife and a fork. And then here are the things you shouldn't do. Never put your knife in your mouth. Again, it's impolite to start eating before everyone has been served. Don't chew with your mouth open. Don't put too much food in your mouth. Never blow your nose onto a napkin or serviette. I suppose most of us know that, quote unquote, but people had to be taught that that wasn't the right thing, and maybe we can have a debate about what's wrong with blowing your nose into your napkin. But anyway, that was polite behavior not to do that. And never take food from your neighbor's plate. So we come now to the modern period. Ferguson argues that this is characterized by a number of approaches. They can all be summed up in 2 or 3 ideas. There's culinary individualism, there's haute cuisine, and there's informalization. What does she mean by these 3 things? Well, culinary individualism is basically about giving every individual the right to decide what they're going to eat. This is very, very different from haute cuisine, which is part of a traditional, collectively decided way of approaching food. Jews and Muslims follow kosher and halal food directives, and Christians adhere to the prescriptions of Lenten abstinence. But the point is that these are individuals being joined to the community by these food choices. Culinary individualism, haute food, is just the opposite. The individual is being set apart from the community by having the right to choose whatever food he or she wants. Of all the practices informed by this haute food approach, vegan or vegetarianism is probably in some ways the most surprising and the most extreme, in part because there's an enormous number of variations on vegetarianism, which just stresses the contemporary idea that individuals have these days are seen as having the right to choose. For some vegans, it's the health benefits of plant-based diets that are key. Others are very concerned about mistreatment of animals. Some of them won't consume cheese that's made with rennet, which is an animal enzyme used to coagulate milk into curds. It does seem reasonable to take account of physiological imperatives such as allergies. It's less evident, but certainly vegans and culinary individualism push the idea, but it's less evident that equal attention should be accorded to every individual like or dislike without medical, religious, or cultural justification. In front of you is a slide that shows different aspects of vegan or vegetarianism. A crucial factor underlying the contemporary period is that an increasing number of meals are consumed outside the home, in restaurants or other institutions. In 1950, only 25% of all meals were consumed outside the home. By 1990, that had gone up to almost 50%, and now, of course, it's much, much higher. There are a number of reasons for this. Growing numbers of older people who can't or don't want to cook their own meals at home, an increasing number of single-parent households, also the fact that restaurants are just very convenient, the growing length of the workday in the United States, and the growth of high-income households, and of course the growth of inexpensive restaurants, fast food establishments that make restaurant eating accessible to many people. One of the central terms that Ferguson uses to characterize the contemporary period is haute food. And haute food, the watchword of haute food is creativity. Using haute food, chefs don't aim at giving us the familiar classics. What they aim at is to come up with the unexpected. And haute food is therefore very eclectic. You can have a caviar and lobster sandwich at a fast food outlet, a hamburger with lobster, foie gras in a fast food outlet. Haute food is the product of the very loosely connected, much more various 20th century food world. And then, of course, there's the world of top chefs. You can see in front of you a slide that shows the top 6, or arguably the top 6 New York chefs: Marcus Samuelsson, Jean-Georges von Guericton, Eric Ripert, Mario Batali, Lydia Bastianich, and David Chang. Today's chefs are in a massive pressured environment. They're trying to deal with haute food, culinary individualism, informalization, absolutely trying to be innovative and give customers the idea that they're getting the latest dishes. On the other hand, there's such a thing as culinary authority, that is, trusting the chef to set the meal, and that still is around. And so there's still an idea that top New York chefs are pushing, that if they wish, diners should simply trust them to set the meal. So you have things like tasting menus, where basically the diner pays a fee and gets a set meal with many, many courses, but it's a set meal. So this is the world of culinary individualism, exploration, experimentation, and top chefs are very much caught up in this world, and they're very much trying to advertise themselves and keep themselves in the public eye. Okay, well, I've talked about some of the major ideas, and as we look at the contemporary food world, it is a very complicated world and there's a lot to say. Finally, Ferguson concludes her book by pointing to the 2007 Disney movie Ratatouille, which she argues sums up our modern attitudes towards food. It's about a rat who wants to become a celebrity chef in Paris and who succeeds. So let's see just 2 minutes of this movie.
This is me. I think it's apparent I need to rethink my life a little bit. What's my problem? First of all, I'm a rat, which means life is hard. And second, I have a highly developed sense of taste and smell. Flour, eggs, sugar, vanilla bean, small twist of lemon.
Whoa, you can smell all that? You have a gift.
This is Emil, my brother. He's easily impressed.
So, you can smell ingredients. So what?
This is my dad. He's never impressed. He also happens to be the leader of our clan. So what's wrong with having highly developed senses? Whoa, don't eat that!
What's going on here?
Turns out that funny smell was rat poison. Suddenly Dad didn't think my talent was useless. I was feeling pretty good about my gift. Until Dad gave me a job. Clean, That's right. Cleanerific poison checker. The cleaner we know. Close to godliness, which means clean. You know, cleanliness is close to... Never mind. Move on. Well, it made my dad proud.
Now, don't you feel better, Remy? You helped a noble cause.
Noble? We're thieves, Dad. And what we're stealing is, let's face it, garbage.
It isn't stealing if no one wants it.
If no one wants it, why are we stealing it? Let's just say we have different points of view. This much I knew. If you are what you eat, then I only want to eat the good stuff. But to my dad...
Food is fuel. You get picky about what you put in the tank, your engine is going to die. Now shut up and eat your garbage.
Look, if we're going to be thieves, why not steal the good stuff in the kitchen, where nothing is poison?
First of all, we are not thieves. Secondly, stay out of the kitchen and away from the humans. It's dangerous.
I know I'm supposed to hate humans, but there's something about them. They don't just survive, they discover, they create. I mean, just look at what they do with food.
How can I describe it? Good food is like music you can taste, color you can smell. There is excellence all around you. You need only be aware to stop and savor it.
Oh, Cousteau was right. Oh, yeah. Oh, amazing. Each flavor was totally unique. But combine one flavor with another, and something new was created. So now, I have a secret life. The only one who knew about it was Emil. Emil! I found a mushroom! Come on, you're good at hiding food. Help me find a good place to put this. He doesn't understand me, but I can be myself around him.
Why are you walking like that?
I don't want to constantly have to wash my paws. Do you ever think about how we walk on the same paws that we handle food with? Do you ever think about what we put into our mouths?
All the time.
When I eat, I don't want to taste everywhere my paws have been.
Well, go ahead. But if Dad sees you walking like that, he's not going to like it.
What have you got there? You found cheese? And not just any cheese. Tome de chèvre de pays! That would go beautifully with my mushroom! And oh, this rosemary! This rosemary, with, maybe a few drops from this sweet grass!
Well, throw it on the pile, I guess, and then we'll,
We don't want to throw this in with the garbage! This is special!
But we're supposed to return to the colony before sundown, or, Dad's gonna...
Emil, there are possibilities unexplored here. We gotta cook this! Now, exactly how we cook this is the real question.
So that's it for now. Speak to you later.